Hi, Danny. Yeah, good for you to join us, and yeah, thanks for coming along. I think it'd be really good to dig into your story a little bit. So I've known you. I'm trying to think how long. Probably 10 years.
Yeah, at
Probably
least,
longer.
yeah.
And I think during that time, obviously, you've gone from SEO roles into kind of more rounded marketing roles, and it's been an interesting career progression. And certainly, you're really interested in the people side of how you can build teams and bring the best out of people. So yeah, I think there'll be some interesting stuff for us to dig into and hopefully share with people as well.
For sure.
Perfect. Do you want to do just a quick background in terms of like almost like your story of where did you start and what have you done kind of towards maybe your Just Giving days and what you're up to now?
Yeah, sure. So name's Danny Denhard. You've probably seen that. There's two of us in the world. So easy to find or easy to troll. I'm not sure which one is better for people. But yeah, so I've been in sort of any sort of management role since sort of 2000. So I very much it actually started in bar work and bar management, and realizing even back then that you could leverage websites and other people's websites for free essentially. So I was headhunted to go into like a computer store there. It was really interesting. It was sort of gaming algorithms even back in sort of 2001. So essentially what we did was this Price Runner and eBay, and what we worked out was we could sell more product by gaming sort of and like the algorithmic filtering. So essentially we would increase the delivery charge but decrease the price of the laptop. So we were selling more laptops via eBay than we were through the store, which was good back then. And then I'd say like I went through this sort of long phase of sort of battling Yahoo at the beginning and then Google all the way through. So just sort of trying to get us ranking and understanding that. And sort of one area that sort of screams out is sort of the finance boom and bust that we went through. So, you know, one of the projects I had was in finance was in a mortgage company, and we rented 555 domains. Essentially, the mission objective was to rank number one for any mortgage term. If we couldn't, sorry?
You rented the domains, did you say?
Yeah, we rented them from a guy up in Scotland.
Interesting.
And it was all around microclustering. So we worked out with an agency that we could probably do these like microclusters. And we worked out really quickly. We only really needed 125, and they were amazing domains, to be honest. They were like all.co.uk's, .com, .nets.
Yeah.
And we worked out that we could rank really quickly and basically do lead generation. So 125 in, we built variations of, and we started to dominate sort of search, and we were generating these really high qualified leads really quickly.
Yeah.
And it just sort of showed you there was like the transition period from Yahoo to Google, and it started getting a little bit more complicated and a little bit more specialist. So when I started in that role, SEO didn't really exist, to be honest.
Yeah,
I didn't know where to put me.
Was that kind of like mid-2000s?
Yeah, it's 2005, 2008 sort of period. And they put me in the IT team because it was online and it had a plug basically.
Yeah.
And, it was a fascinating sort of project. I was technically a project manager, so it was just they called it a project manager because they didn't really know what else to call it, but knew that we could do it. So we took like leads. We were charging leads out from £125 up to sort of £500,
right.
And that took the lead form from 18 questions down to 3 questions, and it sort of proved to me that we could do, as long as you know the most valuable pieces of information. Mm-hmm. And the sort of the secret sauce almost that of these websites, the contact form high up, good content at the top, less important information further down the page, the better we would do. And so I joined at a mortgage boom and then got a mortgage and then it went bang. So it sort of shows you how it changes, and started to use like Facebook and Twitter and stuff to generate leads as well.
Yep.
And that was I call it sort of the gaming algorithm sort of period of my career. And I think it's, when people were asking questions when no one's really using Twitter, it's really interesting because you could get brokers to instantly reply back and qualify a lead really quickly. And it sort of proved to me that there was more to this like internet game than just a search engine and just like 50 websites. There was, or 100 websites. There were so many different options out there and available.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's definitely a time where I think early on there was a limited amount of websites where you could get information from, and I'm not even sure in terms of time-wise when that expanded. But I mean, I got into SEO in 2003, and I guess started using the internet. I don't know, like remember using it at school. I left in '98, so I guess around that sort of time. But it felt it was more like Lycos and chat forums and all stuff that then ended up just taking off. Amazon must have been like late 90s, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was 99 with Relentless and that. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting you say that. I was talking to a friend recently and said how well Ask Jeeves would probably do now.
Yeah.
Like just because of, you know, how interactive it is. And
probably right. Yeah, maybe that was ahead of its time, which sounds weird, but yeah.
I didn't realize until recently it was actually built on top of Google. It was just a.
I remember that it was, yeah.
Just a fascia on top. So
yeah,
and it was sort of interesting. I went and did this sort of stint in agency side, and I think this is where a lot of people find their professional feet, and sort of learn really quickly that search is such an important part. So working with like really huge brands, I think you realise really quickly, rather than the smaller ones I was used to, you realise how important search kind of is, or organic search is, and being number one and how important that was. And I think everyone's done the stint with eBay or PayPal or one of the really big brands, and something we realised really early on, especially in the agency side, was how important it is to sort of get people into the right landing page as quickly as possible. And I remember a stat that sort of eBay gave us at the time was they used to sell supercars, really high-end cars on mobile phones, even sort of in the early sort of 2010s. And that was all down to organic search. And I think it sprung out to me that how important SEO is and was, and it's probably going to be for a number of years moving forward. And
there's something I came across last week that I think was written probably years ago, but it's from Tim Ferriss talking about companies he invests in. And I don't think he does invest in companies anymore, so it probably was written a long time ago. But he said basically his secret sauce, it's not really secret, it's he improves the conversion rate of a website, and then he pours in more traffic that converts from potential customers. And I feel like sometimes we get lost in, there's so many bells and whistles and shiny objects that we could do, but actually at the heart of what you're doing is how do you get more from the business side of you're trying to get more customers for the site. And I think back in the older days, I definitely think from our perspective, and I think we probably at that point in time probably had similar journeys. And then I think you split off in terms of if you love the agency side or you run an agency, then you become more specialist. And another career track could be that it's great to get those learnings, and then you kind of use that to fuel growth in different areas. And how do you take that down a different route? So yeah, I think it's, but at the heart of it, I think it's all about actually how do you understand the business side of how this works, why it works. A more mature way of looking at it's an investment in growth. How do you use that to fuel more growth and generate an ROI? And I don't know. I do feel like maybe the agency side is quite a good education into that. Clients are spending money with you. Typically, they want to see a return on that investment from a business perspective that is paying off.
Yeah, and something I think you don't appreciate when you're a little bit younger, and you don't really necessarily see it as you often, when you're sort of in a management level or sort of senior leadership level, is you typically try and get someone in-house. So you try and get expertise in-house because they're there concentrating on it every day.
Yeah.
But often, sort of a few years ago especially, is when it was sort of probably a little bit less technical and a little less sort of schematic and formulated, is that you had to bring in sort of external help to help you, or you had to find someone who had expertise in areas that you didn't.
Yeah.
So, in the early 2010s, even into the sort of 2015 sort of era, people didn't really have dedicated teams. They might have had one or two people, but they didn't have huge teams like some teams do now. Like some search teams are, you know, way over 5-6 people now, and
Yeah.
an agency in is a way to sort of complement what you're doing, or, you know, take on a discipline you're not very smart in, or it's going to actually be far more cost effective from an external source. So I think something I learned agency side was there's so many different ways that people want to work with you. So like one agency I worked at, I helped build out social media and content marketing, and, you know, I know people sort of tend to call it a little bit more digital PR nowadays, but there are all these different areas that supplement and complement sort of SEO and paid media. And I actually veered off into product management throughout the time because I didn't actually want to be client facing anymore. Mm-hmm. And the more senior you get in agencies, you either have to become far more client facing or you have to sort of take the step away. And I know how difficult that can be for some, but building the products that people actually want and building the packages that people need is such an essential part of agency side. It's something that I think, you know, you probably battle with every day.
No, it isn't. It's definitely more specialist because, again, like thinking about, I started an agency in 2006, and we literally at that point in time, so many people would say, I know we need to do SEO, but it's a dark art. Like I've lost count of the amount of people that would have considered SEO to be this dark art, that it's almost like this black box. No one knows what you do, but it seems to work and it gets you traffic, so let's do it. And I always found that as a bit weird anyway, because I always thought what we're trying to do is make sites more accessible to search in a similar framework of how we work today. But it's definitely got more specialist in terms of roles. And back then, on the client side, it's normally a marketing director or a marketing manager that has budget for SEO. They know it's important. They don't know how to do it beyond reading a few blog posts or maybe going to a couple of conferences or something like that. And we would, I remember one instance where we got handed a contract and it was like, let's see you in 11 months for your renewal. And just get on with it. And now it's actually the people that are buying these services, it's an integrated approach. If they've got an in-house team, normally a head of SEO, potentially a team underneath them, content writers, PR team that's more integrated. And you have to think about how do you mold yourself alongside that team to be kind of almost like one team together, as opposed to we're the agency, we go away and do stuff and we're accountable for everything, because you're not. It's a combined approach. And I think that, to me, actually the people side of that has potentially been a bigger shift in how we work than actually algorithms or stuff like that. I mean, that always changes, we know that will, but how you manage together as a team and how do you find an approach that is no longer the cyclical kind of we're going to in-house it, we're going to agency it. I think now I think there's a level of acceptance that there's a hybrid and there's a place to play for both of them, which personally is good. But yeah, you need to find that balance, sure.
Yeah, and I think there's something that's sort of happening across all of marketing and marketing disciplines is you either become so specialist that you sort of generalists are the ones that act as a glue and make and ensure people sort of come together. And I think there's another side of it, which is, and you know, sort of dark art that you've raised, it's even in 2020, 2021, it's going to be considered that, because the language that, you know, we choose to use, you know, the sort of the abbreviations that we create, they don't really like go hand in hand with what other departments do. And I call it newsroom. It's like a newsroom approach to marketing. It's where you bring everyone together and they talk constantly and they update each other. And marketing's all about being joined up, like marketing and even the sort of Silicon Valley style growth of really trying to accelerate all of the best areas of marketing to get to hyper grow your company is all around bringing people together and making sure that every channel is working to the maximum it can. Yeah. And I think
exactly. Yeah, and it's how do you make that work together? So in terms of your journey, did you make a conscious decision, I guess, once you've gone through kind of iterations of agency life to say, okay, well, I want to go into a broader marketing role and grow into, kind of, it's a good background and it's a good way of looking at things, but there's more to online performance than just organic. and then how do you take that more into a digital focus role? Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
completely. There was like a light bulb moment for me when I was in a really big company. They have a really open office in the south of London, and they played their Christmas advert on the big screen, and everyone was watching at the same time. And I was in there just having a meeting with their internal team, and there was this big like clap and singing, and they were super happy. And they said how important this TV advert was, and then how many channels it was have to be rolled out on.
Yeah.
And this light bulb hit me, and I was like, however good I am at what I do, and wherever I work, there's only going to be a certain amount of influence that this is going to have. And I think you can be the best at any discipline, but until you appreciate how the business operates and how the other teams operate and work together, I think there's only a sort of a total amount of influence that you can have. And I was lucky enough to meet two great co-founders who were looking for an SEO like leader to come in basically and help. It was post acquisition, pre and IPO, and I met them for a couple of times, and they really convinced me. They were like these people that I could learn from. They're very similar age to me. Yeah. They're very driven. They understood the value of search, but also understood how important it was from a complete business perspective. And I went there knowing that we weren't number one, as sort of from a market share perspective, we were bordering 2 and 3.
Yeah, sure.
And I knew that going in there that I could have a sort of broader influence. And I was lucky enough to go and work there and understand different areas of the business and culture, and just meeting the team. You knew everyone was in it and in it to sort of help each other. So I went in, and although it was formerly SEO, it was more like helping to mature social media, helping introduce content, bring PR and search closer together. Because if we're being honest, PR still gets better links than most SEO agencies and in-house teams can ever create themselves.
And I think there's got to be an integration of that. We've actually started moving away from digital PR and more doing kind of top of funnel content that will attract awareness. It can get links, but actually how do we work together with PR agencies, and how do we train them on, let's make sure we're getting SEO value? Certainly at a domain level, I think sometimes I'm quite skeptical about how much value that actually has from an SEO perspective. Certainly, I think there's PR benefit behind it, but I think from a agency perspective, there's more you can be doing that brings it together, as opposed to everyone just trying to get their own slice of the pie. And I get why agencies will try to do it all. It makes sense. You want as much of that budget as you can get hold of. But in terms of what's right for the brand, I do feel like there's a coming together of definitely different channels and how does that work. Like SEO and PR is an obvious one. Paid search in terms of learnings, social media, certainly if you're producing content, etc. And I feel like if you can bring that all together and try and get everyone playing to their strengths, then ideally you're going to go much further than you would do if it's everyone in their own silos we're doing digital PR, but we don't want to talk to the traditional PR team and all of that sort of stuff that obviously still happens, but it doesn't feel like this is optimal for the brand.
Yeah, there's completely, and there's a side of this where I think still doesn't happen, and I think it's sort of lost in pitches a lot. And I've seen it more and more recently. I've sat in so many different marketing pitches, product pitches, and like some of the advisory stuff work that I do. You sit in pitches, and you just see that the agency or the consultancy hasn't necessarily understood the company's objectives.
Yeah.
And they've actually just, pulled out the same template and edited the way that they know. And I think there's this grey area that people don't want to go into, is asking the questions to get the right answers to help the company achieve what they need to do. And often when I said this a few times, there's a do for me and think for me agency. Yeah. The do for me is we know what you want to do, you should go and deliver it. Yeah. And then there's the think for me piece, which is more consultative.
Exactly.
And I think that it's very difficult to do both. And I think if you believe that you're doing both, that you're more on the doing side than the thinking side.
Yeah.
And I think it mostly depends on the person in-house and the direct influence that you have on the relationship and how you collaborate together. But if you're not driving it forward, you're very much just, agencies can sometimes appear like they're just looking for more budget.
Yeah.
They're just looking for a higher budget, whereas actually you should be looking at driving traffic, converting traffic, understanding how the business makes money, where they're failing and where you can help a little bit more. And it's really evident in this year that, I know it's been a unique year for everyone, but I've got a list of tips I can share later on if you like. But there's this, one of them is really just truly understanding what that customer needs.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is sort of just listening, other times it's asking loads of questions. And in a pitch, sometimes it doesn't feel right, but get the right person and the right client, they're going to want you to ask those questions, because it ensures that they know A, what you want, B, what you need to deliver, and C, how you can be like collaborative and deliver together.
I agree with that. I always prefer and actually remotely, I feel like this lends much better, but to try and avoid presentation decks as much as possible and just make it a conversation. Because if it's, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What have you tried before? Like, it feels more natural as just having a chat, and there's two sides to that conversation that you can bring together in order to help someone. And if it's just we've gone away and done our insights and blah, 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 it's like they've seen 90%, if not more of that already. They know it. And I think there's much more you can untap by actually just trying to understand them, their objectives, and where they're trying to get to.
Yeah, and there was like this point when I was in-house that we had a couple of PR agencies that were helping us out, and I think one really understood it and really wanted to help. The other just was looking for more money, and they didn't really understand. They didn't really understand the business. And when you work for a coupon site, the thing that you're looking for most is to get people to use the coupon, and if not, sign up. And there's so many parallels even in today. And we were going to go for an IPO, and it's a time that you have to go super quiet and you have to be really secretive, and there's only certain things you can and can't say. And I asked to sort of broaden out my role and take on more responsibility, and I wanted to take over some of the ownership of the sort of PR side of it, because they didn't quite get it, and there was like an old approach, like a traditional approach to it, and they said it would take 18 months to move me across because of the reliance they had on search. And 60% of revenue will come from search then, from organic search. And I completely understood where the company came from, but I also knew that I wanted and had to diversify, and I wanted to not just do digital, but move into the sort of more holistic marketing that is out today. There's still companies that still don't have to rely on online, but I think we're seeing in 2021 that online is going to be probably a primary source of transaction and revenue for most companies. So
yeah, absolutely. And I've always thought, and quite often I'll turn people away if they make SEO inquiries with us if I don't think SEO is the right channel for them. But I think that the best way to look at this is, how do you understand your customers? Where do they come from? What channels are they converting for? And then how do you turn that into an acceleration plan over the short, medium, long term that's going to pay dividends for them? And if it's quite often, certainly if it's e-commerce, organic search will be, if not number one, probably number two in terms of a revenue driving marketing channel. So that's where I think it's important for us. But that said, if you've got targets and objectives, I think the natural progression is to go to that kind of marketing director level, where you've got overall accountability and budget for growth, and however you choose to do that, it's up to you. And it's probably a balance across the channels. And I feel like that's where, certainly from a career side, you can grow in terms of, like, you might reach a level of, you're a head of SEO, you're SEO director, and then maybe you could move that into bigger companies and progress that way. But it feels like maybe there's a ceiling at a certain point that you need to go into the wider marketing role, because then you're more responsible for the overall performance. And yeah, I think it would be interesting, I guess, from your perspective, of how you change the conversation a little bit towards more wider marketing objectives, and then how you can even like fashion your role into that type of position. Because I feel like once you're in SEO, I've seen a handful of people. I feel like actually the people that I've known, like you and Dave Reynolds and a few other people, that from 10 years ago, there's a certain amount of people that have broken out of that and grown. And I feel like there's two routes. The other route is they've gone more specialist. Maybe they run their own agencies now. Maybe they're very senior in-house. And I don't think there's a right or wrong, but I think if you decide you want to go down that marketing route, it's interesting how you then take that to the next level of how do I get treated seriously? If the marketing director leaves next week, how do I get treated seriously as a candidate for that next role?
Yeah, there's the way I think about it, and the way I've been sort of talking around it and helping different people is, so like SEO is very broad. Like SEO has such far-reaching influence, but I think there's like certain roles that if you were looking more specifically into marketing, there's like other areas that you can really sort of grow into. So if you wanted to make that sort of step, even if it's a step laterally, step across rather than step up, is like growth is, and not, well, I don't mean performance marketing, but I mean like actual growth. Most big companies in the US sort of are desperate for growth marketeers, or people that are in growth that understand the technical side, understand how important content is, how important PR is. So there's all these sort of disciplines that are tied in that you can build out. And search, especially organic people, they tend to have a good understanding of paid, so they can have a good understanding of what really drives people into the site and their natural behavior.
Yeah.
But a lot of the growth work that I was doing when I was at Just Giving and sort of moved into, and I know a lot of other people have done it, and Casey Winters is a good example over in the States, who was at Pinterest and has moved into like a venture capital sort of style role and product roles. There's all these different sort of connectors. So product marketing is a natural fit because you have to understand technical, you have to understand how to write tickets, you have to understand the influence, you have to understand the priority order of it and the way that you have to build it.
Yeah,
digital's an interesting one because digital's become something that in some big companies you've got a digital team, you've got a sort of more traditional team, and they're not necessarily together. So digital's more of a natural transition. But I think, search, paid media is similar. Like something I've been telling people for a little while is what's happening in social media happened in search years ago. Sort of the reducing the influence, reducing the visibility, reducing the reach is something SEOs have had to deal with for years.
Yeah.
When Google changes algorithms, Facebook and some of the other platforms are doing exactly that now. So Instagram's the prime example, like kill reach, get people to do ads is exactly the same in social as it was in search. So that's applicable. Like the first thing to do is go and partner up and buddy up with someone in there. And I think content's the other side that maybe a lot of SEOs have sort of not necessarily considered as an area that they could sort of broaden into or go into, especially sort of from the content marketing side. If you've ever worked with a publisher, like it's all about how many articles, how many videos and that you publish, how many times you get in the news. So like content strategy is a big area. And I know a few years ago, people made that move from more search into more content.
Yeah.
But if you look at it from a flywheel perspective or an engine perspective, a lot of the time is like content's typically in the middle, or product is. But if you understand all the bits that make it go quicker and faster, you become far more relevant. And I think if you wanted to make that broader move, I think you have to make signals and you have to go out and be able to articulate what you want to achieve and how you're best positioned in it and how the other channels. Because when you become more senior, become in marketing, the less you have to be the expert. It's more about how you get the right people in the team and how you get the right supporting actors, as in, agencies or consultants to come in and help you. So, I know some CMOs that probably haven't got their hands dirty for 2.5 years.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They bring in all the smart people, the right partners to do that. And I think search is mature enough to know when to bring in the right people, and when to the right people and the right specialists. I know it's become far more specialized, or people are falling into more specialized buckets. But I think the broader your knowledge, the more interest that you have in marketing, not just in search marketing, the more likely you are to be able to make that transition. And also ask, invite yourself into meetings, ask if you can attend them.
Yeah.
Because ultimately what you attending improves your knowledge, but also improves how people communicate, ensures that you know the language that other people are using. I've been in, really senior board meetings where people come in and they use language that 9 out of 10 people around that big meeting room or the Zoom room now just don't understand.
Right.
It's really important that you use the language that those people do, because you just don't have the time to explain it or articulate it in 20 minutes. You have to get it in 2 minutes, because that exact summary is going to get you the investment, not the really in-depth presentation. I'm king of death by PowerPoint, but
No, that's interesting. One thing I found with a client a few years ago is we spent a lot of time building massive reports that I'm pretty sure our clients barely looked at, but they maybe flicked through in their email. And in the end, what we did is we switched to, okay, let's see how you report within the business. How do we have a line, or ideally a page or two, around what we do that supports those goals? And if we could do that and build into, in this case, her report that she would then show at a more senior level, much easier for us to produce. And actually it got attention at a senior level, because then we're talking their language, we're baking what we do into their report, we've got complete alignment in goals, and it's much better than us going away. And yeah, I mean, SEO agencies are probably the worst at saying, look at us, we fixed all of these issues, we've got all of these links. And when you get to the marketing director level, they just care about how much money you've made them. So I think if you can talk their language, I think that's really key. I think the other thing that I had a question for you actually on this is a term that's been around quite a long time now is a T-shaped marketer. And from what you're describing, it sounds quite similar to me. If you have that core specialism and something that you're rooted in, if this is at least what's got you curious, and then you've built your expertise, in your case, around SEO and search, but you're also looking at how do you not just do that in a vacuum, it's how do you then bring together those other channels. And because of your background, you'll probably always be stronger in SEO than you will be in maybe social media, perhaps. But then as you become more rounded, it's touching upon the other areas, and how do you grow outwards? Does that make sense to you?
yeah, it's funny. I've never, like, I don't take it as a slight that someone would call me an SEO. Like,
Right.
I was always consider myself a marketeer,
Yeah.
because of the work I did and the different clients I had. And interestingly, the first thing that I did when I was even in a computer store was updating content, doing customer support, doing marketing. So search is just, I think, is a specialist discipline that you end up sort of going into. Or,
Yeah.
I think people can choose to go into it now when you're a bit younger and there's so much more information out there. But I think when, like, I see things in processes, so a lot of the time for me, it's understanding a process, trying to be able to break it down and see where it connects with other parts. And the T-shaped market has always been an interesting sort of diagram for people to understand. I think if you're very skills driven and you're very discipline specific, I'd always say, like, draw it out on a map and then see how you can sort of build out into the other areas,
Yeah.
or the other areas of interest. Like, I think it's natural now, because of how the different channels work, is that you probably want to understand how the Twitter algorithm works, or how Facebook bubbles things up based on affinity. And it's very similar to how Google has worked in the past, or potentially could work. And I think when you're trying to broaden your skills out, or you're based on one discipline, it's really easy to say that you're a specialist in it, but it's far more difficult to teach and find those learnings if you don't know how it all works together. And I think it's something, it's on most companies to teach their staff. But one tip I always give people is really learn the business, really learn how it's all connected. Because if you don't understand how all the layers work together, you don't truly understand the importance of the thing that you look after, your specialism. And
Exactly.
you're never going to be able to speak to the product person who makes most of the difficult decisions and prioritizes what of your recommendations, what goes through, what doesn't. I know that the developers have to really brush up on their search skills and SEO skills. They really have to, UX UI really have to understand the importance of landing pages. And when I took over sort of more of the marketing director and took over from a exiting CMO, like the reason why I went into Just Giving was a growth role, and I knew that I could go and be on the management team and develop out crowdfunding. But if I didn't have the right people in place in that team who wanted to broaden out their skills and wanted to learn, I think we wouldn't have had the success that we did, because we'd have been so focused on social, because that was how we grew. Like we're all word of mouth and being a big brand, and a lot of the growth work that we did was to leverage the other side of the business, which was fundraising. So if we didn't have that core grasp of it and didn't really understand the business metrics, and we didn't have daily stand-ups, and we didn't do all this like deep dive into the numbers, then it's really difficult to have that influence and broaden out your skills and own other areas of the business.
Yeah, and also I think the one thing I've just observed that I think is different to you, certainly to myself and other people perhaps in the industry, is I think quite often you can go down the maybe leadership route. You lead by example, this is how I do things, but go away and just do what you think is best, which is probably more my style of I hold people to account, but I'm not too concerned about how they get there, and I'll probably do more of like the externally facing, here's a thought leadership, this is our thinking around this subject. And I think it seems like you've gone much more down the management route. If we've gone for lunch, you're always talking about kind of like, this is how you've got the best out of people. And it feels like a very much in a absolutely positive way. How do you get everything out of the team and more out of the team, that you're not going to take Just Giving to new heights alone as one individual person, but as a team and a collective, if you're all facing in the same direction. So what you're saying, understanding the business, that leads into how do you make sure you set the right goals and objectives for people in the team? How do you help them? How do you support them? And maybe spend more hands-on time with them internally so that they look good, which in turn means your overall results are much better. It feels like it's a more egoless style of, you're not worried about your own, how you're perceived, which I think is great. It's more about what's the outcome that you're really going for, and what's the best way to achieve that.
Completely, and sort of thanks for noticing. And it's something that's I've found through doing it for being in professional environments for 20 years is you can be the best person in your discipline, and you can be the most well-known person in your discipline, but doesn't mean you get cut through in your business. Exactly. It doesn't mean that they're going to listen. The most famous person in search or in marketing might be completely like down the ladder, and people just might not even listen to them internally. Mm-hmm. And like Pinterest did particularly well through SEO. Like Airbnb did probably just as well from a product perspective as they did from anything else, but they knew that SEO was important. Same way that eBay still invests huge amounts of money. Same way that Amazon have an SEO team, Apple have one. Like any really big company still has those teams. But getting the most out of your colleagues and the people around you is so important. Like Liverpool wouldn't win the league if they didn't have Klopp and didn't give the years of investment into him and the team that they did. And like Pep Guardiola is apparently the best coach in sports, but he had to spend a lot of money and bring the right people and bring the right ethos into his team. And I think that's something everyone should learn, maybe, that if you're really good at it, be an internal champion, like help people understand the discipline that you have, do lunch and learns, like take people out, like get them invested in your discipline. Social, for some businesses, have a huge influence, like Gymshark. Social's massive for them. Of course. Yeah. But they have to externally and internally have messaging, and it's been deliberate. It's been a communication channel for them. Yeah, it's been something they've had to do. But growing the people around you is really important. And by growing other people, to help you grow. And the more siloed you are, the less influence that you actually have, the less budget that you'll get, the less respect that you'll have. And when you look to leave or you look to build your own business, there's going to be so many hard learning curves that you end up having versus the not. And I think developing other people is far more rewarding than just developing yourself. Like, I'm a massive self-learner, and I know that's something I've always had to do, but I think if you can teach other people, it's worth so much more.
That was definitely a realization for myself. I did a presentation, and I normally do this at the end of every year. I do like a bigger, how did the year go? What are we doing next year? And I think this was about 3 years ago, but we'd grown 100% year on year for the first 4 years of the business. And I remember reaching a point where it's just like, okay, first few years, I can do that almost single-handedly because I've done it before. I know how to get back there. And you can do a certain level of business to a certain point as an individual. But then you reach a point where, okay, if we're going to carry this on, I'm not going to be able to take that there on my own. And actually, it's much better, rather than I grow 100%, how about everyone in the team grows 20%? And actually, you look at how that interplays together. You then give career growth opportunities to people, you give them responsibility, you invest in their training, their development, again, like lunch and learns, knowledge sharing, R&D, all that sort of stuff. I think that's how you get to the next level, because realistically, if we're getting great results for our clients, sometimes it might come back to me in terms of the credit, and I'm normally now the first one that says, actually, I had nothing to do with it, so I oversaw it. I hired the team, but it's about bringing the team together, having them, giving them the right skills and equipment to do the job. And I feel like that's much more important. The other point I was going to add to that is, I don't know if you've listened to this yet, but this week was launched a podcast from High Performance Podcast with Clive Woodward.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, so good. And he was just talking about, actually, if you're running a business, if you're running the England rugby team, a football club, it's about people. It's about how do you understand them, what makes them tick, and how do you get the best out of them. And I think that's completely true.
There's something on Netflix, I think it's called The Playbook, or The Coach's Playbook.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
There's one on tennis. You and I are tennis fans.
Yeah.
But there's Serena Williams is the greatest ever sort of female tennis player. Yeah. And she has, her coaches never made it as a pro. Like most tennis coaches never really made it professionally. And he talks around like the psychological style of it, the way that he had to build her up, the way that he had to it's repetition,
yep.
and then learn from other people. And, there's so many parallels between sports and business. And I think it's the same in any sort of discipline you're in. I said this to a well-known marketing team from a well-known company recently, is that like people, it's usually we before me. So it's usually the company before me. And when people become unhappy, it's me before we. But if you think around it in an organization, it's you, it's the team you're in, then the department you're in, then the company you're in, and then maybe the part of the organization that you sit in as well. So if you're in a big company, you're one brand of many brands. And, if you can't find the right coaches and mentors internally, you're not like, you have to go out and find it externally.
That language is really important. Like we try to use that with our clients as much as possible. If we're on the same team, this is us. It's not you need to do this, it's we need to do this. And I'm the same with, if ever I talk externally about our team, it's our team. It's not, this is my team. And I find that language almost a bit cringeworthy, where it's, I did this, my team did this. It's like, but we're all equal. We're all here kind of like doing, as humans doing a job. And I don't know. I find that the hierarchy behind it just feels a bit wrong. I think it should just be, what is it that we're trying to achieve as an output together, and everyone's got their role to play in different areas of that journey.
And something that a lot of people who might listen won't see this, but often people want to be in that big glass room where the senior leadership or the ELT or SMT have their meetings.
Yeah.
But most people in there are trying to do everything they can to get out of it. Yeah. Because you spend so much of your time defending your team, especially in marketing. Like I've been the most senior marketeer, and on a couple of occasions, and I've sat in hours and hours of meetings and QBRs of companies and stuff like that, and you spend so long defending ROI and CAC and LTV and why a certain team in your department has done this certain activity that doesn't always ring true or goes against what you said you were going to do. Like, you spend so long in that it often becomes team versus team or department versus department. And if you don't have someone who continuously tries to act as the glue in your team or in your department or across the company, it's very difficult to get that. And I think companies in 2021, 2022 are going to be hiring people, specialists, who are going to be around building more community within companies. So I call it a culture community manager. So, and they can be from all walks of life. It doesn't have to be HR, probably better if it isn't, but they can bring people together. And if you understand how tribes and herds, how social media works, you understand how people, what makes them tick, what they like, what they don't like. And then you have a better rapport with your internal team, with agency partners, with consultants that might come on, or like specialists that you might bring on for specialist projects. So it's really important that people understand that.
Yeah, I looked a lot into holocracies last year. I don't know if you've seen those before, but just in terms of like having clear roles and responsibility, but less of a hierarchy of I'm your boss. So there's less kind of like middle management and much more how do you interact with everyone else based on the objective that you're trying to achieve. And I think there's a lot of that makes perfect sense to me in terms of how different roles interact together and having the flexibility to kind of focus around that key output.
Completely. There's certain things that you're never really taught, but you learn. And there's so many unwritten rules and so many unknown knowns. There's all that knowledge that's stuck in that one person's head. If they're not shared, it's very difficult. And I'm a huge believer that wikis, and if you've got Confluence or you use Notion or something like that, that you have shared areas that you continuously update and you share that information. Because if you don't have that, the other teams don't know what you're doing typically. Like, if you don't have a weekly stand-up, it's difficult to have that. If you don't share the information, the performance with your agency partner or your consultant, it's going to be very difficult for them to understand the impact, rather than digging into analytics or another search tool. It's really important. And there's a term called bike shedding, where people have an opinion when it seems simple and easy and normal. Often people go quiet when they don't have an opinion. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. They're just not an expert in it. And I think often that's sort of things that are overcomplicated. People they want you to go and lead on. So knowing the difference, and knowing that you can share that information, or when something's silent, it could be a good and a bad silence. Or when someone's got an opinion, it doesn't mean that it's their opinion versus yours. It just means that they're very interested, or it's a normal part. And I think that's what you're going to get when it evolves through different companies and different roles.
I think that makes sense. And definitely the one thing, just reflecting on this from my own experience, is in the past, I think my leadership style was just very decisive. It was, if someone comes to me and says blue or red, it'd be like red, and just do it. But it's like, I'm guessing. I don't know. And now I feel like I'm much more comfortable with our team asking me a question and me saying, I don't know the answer to that. What do you think? And actually pushing it back a little bit, but not in a I'm trying to shirk responsibility, more I'm trying to understand the problem from their perspective. They've probably got much more depth of knowledge in that. They just want me to okay it. Normally they know what to do. And I think you need to get the best out of the team. If you know the answer, then maybe make a decision, but be clear on why you're making that decision. If you don't know the answer, I feel like the worst thing to do is probably what I used to do, which is just guess and be decisive. And actually, how do you then look into it? And I don't think there's anything wrong in saying I don't have an opinion on that, or I don't know the answer to that. It opens up more people in a way that they can step up.
Yeah, there's Matthew Said is an author. He used to be a table tennis or ping pong player.
I read his book Bounce.
Yeah. Black box thinking completely opened my eyes when I read it. And he has a thing called dominance leader, which is the person that is hard hitting, or has to lead with an iron fist, tells people what they have to do, It's sort of the old school way of doing it. And then there's a thing called a prestige leader, which is you lead through knowledge, you lead through intelligence, you lead through respect. And I think the more hybrid that we are, the more remote that we are, the less dominant leader is going to actually have an important part of business. It's actually going to be the prestige leader that sort of takes over. And you're exactly right that the most powerful bit of information that someone wants, other than the cues, the cue in between your response and your verbal cue, is that people want to know that either that they're heard, that they're valued, and that they're trusted. Yeah. And you saying, I don't know, what's your opinion, is going to have a much more profound impact on their day than you telling them red or blue, because they want that. And whether you're agency side, you're a consultant, or you're in-house, what the most important part of information is.
Yeah. Is heard, valued, respected. I like that. It's also like the mastery, autonomy, purpose, which I think comes from Dan Pink. And I think, again, they're like conscious of time, but maybe to wrap up, if there's anything that you have on how do you get the best out of people, is there anything that you've learned almost through like the arc of your career of how do you go from learning a craft to actually how do you get the best out of people? And obviously that's something that you're very focused on now in terms of culture, but is there anything that you would see as being, if someone came to you and said, I've moved from a leadership role into a management role, how do I get this team together and how do I get them pulling in the same direction? Are there any tips you would give them?
Yeah, sort of quick fire ones. Get everyone, campfire, get everyone around eating and drinking together. Yep. So it doesn't have to be alcoholic. It doesn't have to be, like a meal. It can be just people all sitting around the same table. So it could be remote, and get people eating the same food. So whether it's a pack of crisps or, a Mars bar or something, get people eating together at the same time, sharing stories. It's the easiest way.
That's a socially, focus. Get to know each other.
Yeah, get to know each other. Then continuously have it. So have it like formally informal. So have it so it's like at the same time. So 10:15, do it at 10:18. Like informal times stand out in people's minds. So get people together at certain times and get them doing the same activity but talking around different actions or their projects. So something I use often is 2 wins, 1 challenge. Mm-hmm. So 2 wins, so you celebrate everything together. 1 challenge is that you all brainstorm together and you try and say, oh, I've learned from this, or this is what you could do, or this is a really good stakeholder to talk to. So that's
because quite often it can be bring all of your problems and it just feels overwhelming. Whereas actually, if it's in the light of we're doing pretty well, but we could be better, I feel like that's just a much more positive conversation.
Yeah, there's a thing called mad, glad, sad that a lot of product people use. So what you're mad about, what you're glad about, what you're sad about, it's like a retrospective. Right. But if you remove mad out of the equation, it's far more positive. Yeah. And if you start with a negative, something that Bob Iger says you always should start with a positive. He's the chairman of Disney. Yeah. He says you start with a positive. And it's completely true. Like as soon as you start with a negative or you start a meeting with a negative, everyone's head goes down. It's very difficult to get people's heads back up. So get people to start with a positive and get them talking through what's gone so well. I think something that I've learned more and more is get people to talk more openly and more honestly. Like there's so many different books and podcasts and that's available now, but something I've learned is like people that just don't know each other very well. Yeah. And get people to understand their motives, their reactions. Like 16 personalities is something you can do for free, and you talk it through. It's great. Like if you know what personality type you are or what Myers-Briggs you are.
We did a Balbin report across the team and then mapped where if we got kind of like the group of mindsets, I guess, in terms of like what people are focused on and where some of the gaps that maybe we look to fill. And that was quite interesting just to see that, not just individually, but across the team.
Yeah, and some people see it as like a horoscope. So like some people are skeptics, but if you just know some people's motives, you understand what makes them happy or what makes them disheartened, will give you such a different perspective. Like understand if someone's an introvert, an ambivert, or an extrovert. Like you'll know the extroverts because they'll tell you and you'll hear them. Whereas like ambivert, some people can be talkative, some people can be quiet. Mm-hmm. But it's how they get their rest, how you get their energy. Extroverts get their energy externally and from other people. Introverts are like, they have to go into the shell to re-energize. Like I'm more ambiverted, but like I have far more introverted tendencies. So like sometimes I'll go quiet for a day, and that doesn't mean I'm not, just means I'm getting my energy back. And I think those are types of things that you need to learn. And then something for probably more specific for SEOs and for search people is go and talk to different teams and go and get a partner, like buddy up, get a buddy system going and buddy up with someone in another department. And then you'll start understanding how other teams operate, and you'll start understanding how they do things differently and how you can bring it into your own team. Because so many people have, at search, you can stay in a role for a long time, or you can jump around and earn more money. But it's very rare that people within organic search tend to always get to know people very well in other departments, and that often works in their detriment because they don't understand the motives, how you could benefit, how you could help each other in the long term, and how you could shift that. So, and knowing that.
I also know one person in particular that this is one of the only people I know that have really done this, but they've specialised in SEO, worked at probably one of the most impressive CVs I've seen in SEO in terms of like brand sides, big budget kind of and high influence and impact work. But their view was, okay, well, I've done it all in SEO. I now want to do a paid search, because if my career plan over the next 5 to 10 years is I want to be a CMO or at least a board advisor on marketing. And I have a gap in my CV at the moment, is that I've done all the organic stuff. I don't need to strengthen that. Yes, that's my skill set. Yes, I could earn a lot of money there. But to get to the next level, I want to challenge myself in paid. And I'm going to spend a year or two doing a paid search role, because that's going to actually plug in the gaps for where I really want to go. And I do feel like sometimes everyone can look short-termism in terms of, or short-termist in terms of where they're trying to get to. And that was sort of the one example, and I'm sure he'd be extremely successful, has been so far, but how to get to that next level and thinking not just the next role instead. It's where do I really want to get to, and what do I need to do in the meantime to get towards that over the medium to long term?
Yeah, there's so many learnings. Like LinkedIn's a brilliant tool, right? Because you can learn so much from how other people have done it, what their career moves are, the language that they use. And I was lucky that I had the opportunity in some of the places that I did, and I carved out to a point for myself in other areas and other businesses. But I think if you know that you want to broaden out your horizon and you want to broaden out your role, just understand where your strengths and weaknesses are. Like I write regularly on my blog and on my focus site, and something I've suggested a few times is personal and professional SWOT. Do a personal one to understand how your strengths and weaknesses. Do a professional one, and then work out what areas you want to go into. Like if you've got an interest in an area, like there's never been a better time to go and build something yourself. So like a Shopify site, or go and build your own website, or if you're really into publishing and writing, go and write it. Like something that SEOs do far better than anyone else is give information away for free.
Yeah, true.
And like something I've been thinking around for a long time, and I have 2 newsletters and whatever else is search. If there's some really good writers, if they bundled together, they could go and create a paid newsletter that people would pay a lot of money for, and they'd pay every month just to get their knowledge and expertise and insight.
Yeah,
and it happens in every other discipline, every other marketing discipline, any other business discipline. But there's ways to go out and do it and manufacture it and learn different businesses. So if you feel like you're not getting that insight, or you don't know how to forecast, create something that you can, or go and find the person who creates the forecast for the business, or ask if you can project lead it. And most marketing directors, CMOs, will love extra help and love someone to come and be partner up with them. And the other side of it is, if you can go and create something, doesn't mean you have to invest a load of money in. Just look at some of the small businesses that pivoted in the first lockdown. Like they did so well. So if you've got a passion in baking, for instance, like go and create your own site and start selling brownies or whatever you want. But you'll have to do all the marketing yourself. So you can do paid if you wanted, you could do social if you wanted, you could do you can take it a performance perspective. But it's all experience you're probably not getting, or experience that you could do yourself, to then say, hey, I have got this experience, I want to go and take this on. I want to go and like broaden out my horizon, my skill set, or in 3 years' time, I want to go and be the marketing director, or director of growth somewhere, and then here are the steps to take. And don't be afraid to reach out to people that have done it. Like, Search is one of those communities that is very tribal, and they want to help each other, and it's something that's so unique to the SEO community. But there's a lot of people that want to do it. There's a lot of mentorship opportunities that you can have or ask, and like, don't be afraid to have your shot and ask someone. Like, there's so many times years ago that I'd reach out to CMOs and say, hey, I've got this question, do you mind helping me out? And 90 times out of 100 they would when they had time. So,
I agree with that, and I've found that if I've given a presentation and said that if you've got any questions, send me an email at the end, I think quite often people are just like, oh, I won't do that because I don't want to bombard the speaker with lots of questions. And the reality is, for every talk to 100 people, you might get 3 or 4 at best, but you're not going to get like everyone that's doing that. And if I've been emailed those questions, every time I've got back to people, because it's okay, well, I've done that presentation to try and help people, and it's an education piece. So why wouldn't I try and help afterwards? And I think likewise on the other side, if there's problems that you have, pretty much every problem has been solved by someone somewhere before. So try and seek them out and get their opinion and advice.
Yeah, and just briefly on that point around when you talk at conferences, or you're on a panel, like, if you get those questions or you've had them a lot, share them. Like, just go out and share them, even if it's on Medium or your own blog post, or if you've got a newsletter or whatever, or what have you. Like, share that information, share it on LinkedIn, because if you're getting that question, there's probably many people that have wanted to ask it, just haven't had time, or don't know where to find it. Like, there's so many ways that you can share that information.
There's at least 100 people for every question that gets asked that have the same challenge, probably a lot more. So I think that's a good place to wrap it up, because conscious of time, and thanks a lot for that, Danny. Is there anything in terms of how people can find you, what's best for you these days? Is it kind of your website or Twitter?
Yeah, sure. So at Danny Denhard on almost every platform. I've got mustreads.co.uk, which is one of my newsletters that goes out. That's sort of broader interests around business and that. And then focus.business is my consultancy, which is around performance and company culture. So if you're interested, definitely check me out. And my DMs are open. So if you've got any questions that you might want to ask, I
feel like I've got lots of questions that we could go on for at least another hour. So check your inbox. No, that's really good. Thank you for that, Danny. It's hopefully been very helpful for everyone else as well. So brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Kev.